to accept minutes from February 29th.
Second.
Motion seconded to accept the minutes from February 29th, 2024. Any discussion? All in favor?
Just wait for her.
Are we too far ahead of you? We're good? All right.
What time was it when you started? Did you get that?
16:58.
Perfect. All right, thank you about that.
So we're here on business for variance appeal for Sanborn Lane, tax map U09, lot 27A, applicant David and Suzanne Abbott. We have representatives for, do you have it?
Yes, I have Chad Truman from Turnkey Homes and Matt Burke from Riverside Survey.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, I'll just start off by saying I'm Dave Abbott, this is my wife Suzanne Abbott, and we're new to this process. We haven't gone through anything like this before, so please steer me in the right direction if I go astray. Just figured I'd start out by giving you a little bit of background, which I put in the letter. My folks purchased Sanborn Lane in 1978 from Cynthia Rydholm, from Seltzer and Rydholm. At that time, they had 450 feet of frontage and 2 acres of property. And then over the years, the abutter to the east, Robert Thorpe, had systematically gone through and approached camp owners along not just Sanborn Lane, but Rich's Camp Lane, selling additional acreage for those that needed it for septic repairs or septic systems or whatever. My father had always hoped that he could give a piece of land to my wife and I. He acquired some additional land from Robert Thorpe, and then he had sold off 200 feet parcel to the south to a family from Boston. He was a Boston firefighter. That's Jim and Cecilia Mahoney. So we had the 2 lots, a back lot which we referred to, which was a piece that my parents got from Robert Thorpe, and then the front lot, which still had the 250 feet of frontage. And after my father passed, my mother gifted it to my wife and I, and that's when I engaged Matt Burke from Riverside Survey, because my father had used his father-in-law, Belden Survey, for a lot of the survey work that he had done to date. And so at the time we had that lot reconfigured to include a right-of-way to the lake, we had always assumed and felt that it was a buildable lot. We weren't told otherwise. And so at the time that that lot was created in 2018, we just were biding our time until such time that we could go ahead with our plans to build. And so it came as a shock to us when, when Chad approached Kingston to, we had the septic design, we paid for the drawings, and all of a sudden we found out that we were short on the square footage, which was a shock to me because I wasn't expecting that. I thought we were good to go right from 2018. So, in finding that news out, the first thing I thought of was, well, geez, maybe I can approach the new owner. The new owner is no longer Thorpe's, it's the Playsteads out of Kennebunk, Maine. I approached them to just make an offer to acquire some additional square footage to get us to that threshold of 80,000 square feet. And it started out, my nephew had their contact information because my nephew was friends with them. And we reached out to them about acquiring some additional square footage. And they initially responded that he needed to check with his wife. His wife was in Europe, and that as soon as she got back from Europe, he would let us know. And so about a week later, he got back to me and says, oh yeah, we would be willing to sell you that piece of land, make us an offer. So I didn't really know. I mean, we only needed about 16,000 square feet, so, and it's pretty marginal land. It's right along the power line, so I threw out a figure of 10,000. And then he countered it right away at 20,000. So I'm not gonna say no. In the position, I'm just gonna make that offer. So we accepted that offer, and then it just went dormant. It got ghosted, and I left, multiple messages, and my sister, who has their contact information with his wife, messaged, and it still went dormant. So we just were scratching our heads and said, well, I guess the next best thing we can do is to approach the board and just file for the appeal. because we just feel like that's no longer an option. For whatever reason, it just went dormant. So, and in the history, you know, going back on the history, I mean, we've been coming up to this lake since 1966 when I was 5 years old. My folks bought it in 1978, again, from Cynthia Reinhold. My mother, after my father retired from Travelers Insurance, they lived on Allen Hill for over 30 years. My mother wanted to be here today, by the way, but she's 88 years old, and the trip and the travel was gonna be a little bit too much. So, you know, she has our support. She's hopeful that this can get resolved, because it was always my folks' intent that for us to have this piece to be able to build on. So at that point, I'd like to turn it over to Matt. You can maybe share some information about how we went through
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, at the time of the division, he approached me with basically that layout that you see there, with the proposed structure drawn in the way that it was drawn on the application. And that house was going to be in that shoreland zone portion of the lot. And so it was our belief that because that would have to be approved to be built by the shoreland zone rules, that the lot itself would have to meet the shoreland zone criteria. So it never entered our thought that it would have to be the extra footage, because the structure, which is what all these standards are developed for, is to decide whether you can build or not, was actually in the shoreland zone. And I didn't find anything concrete, whether I talked to Joelle about that. I had asked her and had an email about whether the right-of-way area would be counted against us, and she had at that point replied that no, that the right-of-way, but we were talking back and forth about this plan, but I don't want to overstate and say that she had agreed to this at that time, because I couldn't say that for sure. But she knew what we were doing, and she had confirmed that no, the area in the right-of-way wouldn't be subtracted from the acreage. And again, we're straddling two zones, and we're, well over the one zone. Where, the area that we do have is somewhere in between what the two require. And the lot next door that was built upon, that's in the shoreland zone, crosses the two zones, and there isn't 80,000 square feet there. And that was allowed to be. There's more in the shoreland zone for sure, but the total lot doesn't meet that same 80,000. And there is a piece of that rural merged with that lot as well.
So the structure would be in the shoreline zone?
Yeah. So over the 100-foot, but within the 250.
Well, actually, just correct, I think we were going to be about 200 feet back.
215.
215,
Yeah.
from the high water mark to where the front of the build would be about 215.
But it falls within that 250
Oh,
foot
that's right,
zone. That's the-
right.
Did we change the zoning from the time they purchased it to the house?
So, because ideally, they would have wanted something in writing from the code officer at the time that said, this is a legitimate lot, even though it didn't have the 80,000 square feet, or it didn't have the 200 feet of shore frontage, because the shoreline zoning lot requires both road frontage, acreage, which is only 40,000 square feet, but also the 200 feet of shore frontage. So because the rest of the parcel is in that rural zone, it comes under the 80,000 square feet, which they didn't have because they had basically said, like, they had shot themselves in the foot back in 2002, I think it was 2018.
2018, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
And had it been grandfathered before and they didn't change the lot lines, it would have been grandfathered. But because they changed the lot lines, the code officer at the time may have wanted to tell them, hey, you might lose grandfathering. I don't know if that discussion ever happened. It doesn't sound like it happened.
One comment on that, the standards say if applicable. And so it says 40,000 square feet, 200 feet of road frontage and 200 feet of shore frontage. And my interpretation of that has always been that if you have 250 feet of frontage on the lake, you can't split that in half and create two lots with 125. But it's not necessarily saying that anything in the shoreland zone has to have 200 feet of frontage. It's just saying that it can't have a substandard frontage to deter those slivers from being created. So if you had a lot, and then there's another part of the standards where it requires the first 100 feet to stay so from the shoreline back, 100 feet is required to stay the same width as the frontage, because they don't want that first section to be altered, allowing for anything past 100 feet within that shoreline zone to not necessarily have frontage, as long as it doesn't have a substandard frontage.
I have a question. Can the building size be smaller to meet the requirement?
Well, it's the lot size that they need, the 80,000, not the building size. Yep. So the building size doesn't really matter for the request of the variance. They're requesting basically an acreage variance, not a square foot variance for building.
But along the lines of that too, we went with a modest size build. We went with just something slightly over 1,000 square feet, nothing really extraordinary. I mean, we just want something, relatively small. We don't want a big, big mansion or anything like that.
In the proposed right of way under Barbara Abbott,
Yep.
would that give enough square footage?
That right of way
She was-
actually belongs to him,
Okay.
and she has right of way across that.
Oh, okay, I
to
got
get
you
to her
now.
property. That's part of his acreage.
All right.
Yeah, and Attorney Dow, after Matt had worked the configuration, Attorney Dow took that and then had it recorded. But he was the one who worked up the language in the deed for the right of access across to my mother's property, and then the 50-foot right away to the lake with the language in it on the deed.
You got a question?
I don't have a problem with it at all.
Any comments from the public? I guess that's you, Chief.
No, a motion makes.
You want to go for the 4 parts?
Yeah.
Yeah, go through 4 parts.
So, just to be clear, so how we're gonna do, they're gonna vote on all 4 criteria. We don't have to get a vote for it. You just get an affirmative whether or not they agree. All 3 of them would have to agree in order to find each of the 4 met. So at the end of it, we'll get a vote and, yeah, just so you know.
Okay.
All right, sorry.
All right.
Go ahead.
The first criteria, if the land cannot yield a reasonable return unless variance is granted.
And I agree with that. They would back out.
Okay.
I agree with that as well.
They can vote on all at the end.
Yep, so, yeah, we'll just say they all agree, so we'll check them. Yep.
The second criteria is the need for the variance is due to unique circumstances of the property and not the general conditions of the property.
I agree.
And the third one is the granting of the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality. Agree, disagree?
Say the question again, so it won't alter?
It won't alter the essential character of the locality. And number 4, excuse me, the hardship is not the result of action taken by the applicant or a prior owner.
I think that we should probably read through that whole thing, just because we did discuss that they did kind of do that, but we want to make sure we really agree.
Yeah.
I'll read it.
Yeah,
We're
So
gonna
it's
rule
all
on it.
right.
yeah, yeah.
It should have been pointed out to him.
This particular lot was created with the intent of being a buildable lot. Prior to the reconfiguration of this lot in 2018, the existing lot was somewhat irregular and we wanted the lot to become slightly closer towards the lake. We relied on professionals, survey legal, to get this correct. Had we known in 2018 that the rural zone applies and we needed a minimum of 80,000 square feet lot for a buildable lot, we would not have had this lot created in this current configuration and would have attempted to build on a formal lot, possibly grandfathered. We have invested significant time and money to this point in time with regards to survey costs, legal costs, site improvements, and now building designs and septic designs. We would not have incurred those costs if we knew we were dealing with a non-buildable lot. Agree, disagree?
I
I agree.
agree. I think they had misinformation.
All right, Jim, now you can do the motion.
Okay, I motion that we allow the variance.
And the variance itself will be, where is it?
And I second.
16,402 square feet.
Motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? So moved.
There was a signature page somewhere,
It
but,
usually is.
oh, I didn't get them typed up. Okay, so I'll have to get them typed up, and then I have to get them notarized, and I'll have to get you guys to come back and sign them
No
again.
problem.
That's my
Well, you
fault.
get until Friday for me.
I'll be back here at 7.
I'm not gonna be that quick. Well, actually, I could probably go type them up. You guys got about 15 minutes to wait? Yeah, that's all right, then I can get you
Oh,
a
yeah.
copy tonight? Okay.
Whereas, no other business can be taken tonight, I'll take
Yeah.
a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor? Adjourn.
Thank you.
Formalities.
Thank you, guys. Now, the plan is year-round, you're gonna go down there eventually?
Most of the,
Part of the year.
Well, no, I mean, wintertime, it's pretty icy down to the road.
Yeah, I get a little.
Maybe keep it-
1,000 feet is a lot.